In this lecture, I'm going to teach you how to send text messages using Twilio. Twilio is a very popular communication platform for adding voice, video, and messaging to your applications. For example, you can quickly make and receive video calls, send text messages, and this is particularly useful for confirming reservations, sending appointment reminders, or promotions. The possibilities are endless. They provide an API that is perfectly documented and is super easy to use. So we can directly communicate with this API by sending HTTP requests using the request module. But they also provide a library that we can install using pip or pipenv. This library is essentially a wrapper around their API. So it gives us objects, and these objects encapsulate all that HTTP communication. So we no longer have to work at a low level of sending HTTP requests to Twilio API. We work at a higher level in a more abstract and simplified fashion. They're objects. These objects have methods, we call them, and they internally will take care of sending the right HTTP requests to Twilio API. All right, so the first thing you need to do is to create a Twilio account. Let's go to the sign up page. Here we have a simple form. You need to provide your first name, last name, email, and password. On the next page, it's going to ask you to provide a phone number, and this is used to verify your account. So pause the video and do these steps. When you're done, come back, continue watching. Okay, so here we are on Twilio console. On the left side, let's go to phone numbers. We need to provision a phone number for sending text messages or making phone calls. So let's click Get Started. And then click Get Your First Twilio phone number. All right, this is the number we're going to use to send a text message in the next step. So let's go ahead and choose this number. Beautiful. We have set up our account. Now we are ready to write a program to send a text message using Twilio. So let's start by creating a brand new project. We're going to call that PyText. Now let's go to this folder and open it in VS Code. All right, here first we need to install Twilio. So pipenv install Twilio. Okay, beautiful. Now let's add a new file here. We call it app.py. Next, we need to select our virtual environment. So we can either click this virtual environment on the status bar, or we can press Shift, Command, and P on Mac, or Shift, Control, P on Windows. Here we search for Python interpreter. There you go. So let's select that. And we set this to PyText. Okay. Now, from Twilio.rest, we need to import the client class. So this class represents a client to Twilio REST API. Now let's create a client object. Here we need to pass an account SID, which is short for security identifier, as well as an authentication token. We can find both these on Twilio console. So here on Twilio console, on the top, you can see the project name. Right below that, we've got account SID or security identifier. Let's copy this. Now back in VS Code. Here I'm going to store this in a separate variable. So later we can export this and put it in a separate module. So account SID, we set it to this string. Now back to Twilio console. Below account SID, we've got authentication token. So let's view that, copy. And then similarly, we're going to store it in a separate variable. So auth underline token, we set it to this string. Now we create a client object and pass account SID as well as the authentication token. And here's our client object. This client object has a few interesting attributes. The one that we're going to look at in this lecture is messages, and we use that to send text messages. We also have calls for making voice calls. We've got fax, video, chat, and so on. So, messages. Now, this object has a method called create. Here we need to pass 3 pieces of information. 2, which we set to a phone number, from underline, which we set to our Twilio number. This is the phone number that we generated earlier. And finally, body. Let's say this is our first message. So with only 4 lines of code, we can easily send a text message to any numbers in the world. This create method takes care of sending the right HTTP request to Twilio API. So finally, it will return a call object. This call object has attributes like date created, date sent, date updated, and so on. So this was the basics of sending text messages using Twilio. Now, earlier when we consumed the Yelp API, I told you that you should not store this kind of information in your source code and then check it into a version control system like Git. So as a best practice, we should take these two variables out, put them in a separate file, and then exclude that file from our version control system. But I'm not going to do that because you already know how to do it, and I don't want to waste your time repeating what you already know.